What's up, guys? Welcome to the Planet Soccer Podcast, Episode 1. Who are we? What are we? What are we wanting to do? When are we going to do it? Things like that. I'm your host, Reed Simpson, here with my co-host, Dylan Wilcox. I'm in Texas. He's in Michigan. It's July 5th, 2022. Dylan, how are we?
Doing good. Feeling excited about the podcast. We're gonna have, I think we're gonna have potential to have some really good guests and some pretty good American perspective on European soccer. So I'm excited to.
Yeah, let's first talk about. I'm going back to our Twitter DMs, and I'm going to try to find the one that I sent you originally. But what I wanted to originally do with this podcast is, there are a million out there, and we're not trying to be just another soccer podcast or just another football podcast. We want to really kind of dive into the American perspective on the sport. We're not going to debate Chelsea versus Tottenham is the third best team in England. Well, we might get into that sort of stuff, but the point is we're not going to be just a round table, argumentative, yelling at each other type of podcast. We want to be more constructive. We want to talk about the sport in America, particularly its popularity or lack thereof in America. What can be done to elevate that popularity, maybe alleviate some of the stigma of it being a boring sport, because we get it. Trust me, we do. I've been there. I've had that feeling about the sport. I don't know if I've had that feeling about the sport in a while, that it's necessarily boring, because at a certain point I began to understand that, okay, it's not just whether the ball goes into the back of the net, but I very much have been a World Cup only fan pretty much my whole life. And, if I wake up early on a Saturday, Sunday morning in the past and I've seen a Premier League game on, I won't change it. I'll leave it on, but I haven't actively seeked out watching those games. So kind of bring it all back. We want to take that American perspective, and especially with the World Cup coming to the U.S. in 2026, or North America in 2026. I think, 16 of the 21 sites are in the U.S. So it's more or less an American World Cup. I think we'll probably get the final, and most likely the opening ceremonies as well. But when I messaged Dylan, I was kind of looking at it like, okay, I started a podcast earlier this year with some buddies, and we were talking college baseball, and I kind of learned how to start it, how to upload, how to edit, what the nuances were, and learned how easy it was if you knew how to do it. And it's fun. It's fun to talk about what you like to do. And, it's a good alternative from just refreshing Twitter. You actually get out there and you get to talk about it with somebody. So here we are. That's what we're doing. Dylan, kind of tell me about whenever I messaged you and you started thinking about the podcast, what was kind of going through your mind, and what do you want to focus on and really get out to whatever listeners we have?
Yeah, I think you kind of touched on the most relevant piece for me already is kind of the stigma soccer has in the U.S. It's a sport that everybody plays in kindergarten here. So it's probably the first sport most kids play. But it very quickly in elementary school dies out as the cool sport for a lot of people in the U.S. And that's kind of, at least when we were growing up, I think that's starting to kind of change a little bit. I do think it's starting to gain a lot of traction. But like you said, I think kind of bucking some of those stereotypes about it being boring, and offering a perspective that is not only American, but both of us are fairly new to being diehards. In high school, I started to get really, really into European soccer. I kind of fell out of it a little bit back half of college. We both were working for Mizzou baseball, so honestly, I didn't have a lot of time, honestly, to focus on much else. And then I worked in baseball for a while, so I honestly, there's probably 4 or 5 years where I maybe watched 1 or 2 games, but have really started to dive back into it in the last couple of years, with pretty much all of my attention in season. So I think kind of bringing a newer American perspective for somebody who is a little bit newer of a fan or a diehard fan, I think is kind of an interesting take. Because like you said, there's a million podcasts out there that are arguing over,
that know what they're talking about, and if grew up around the sport.
Right. And they could probably talk
Yeah.
circles around both of us. But I think that'll be what's kind of fun about this for us. Is personally it'll be a lot of fun to have to watch the game in a different way, because it is something we're going to be talking about on a weekly basis. So I do think that.
Yeah, that's a good segue into kind of what I was going to say with the two of us is we are by no means experts. We're not tactical experts. We are not experts on any of the particular leagues, although we do know the Premier League. I would consider us both very well versed in that league. We know how the world of soccer works. We know, the different European competitions. We know how each kind of country plays and the formations and how coaches tactically set up, how Pep Guardiola sets up versus how Thomas Tuchel sets up. But we don't, you couldn't, it wasn't like what we go to the bar and talk about. We would talk about American football or baseball. So we want to take the people that listen along with us kind of along this learning experience with us. We probably will, if I think we have the audience that I'm expecting to have, we will have a head start on much of our audience as far as education goes and kind of what we know about the sport. But we aren't experts, but the goal is to get there and kind of talk through. Basically, we want to embody the process that we want America to go through as a country. Like, understand this sport and recognize that there's a lot to love here, and there's always something. Like, if you get tired following the Premier League, then there's something else to follow, or there's no off season pretty much. I mean, these guys have a month off, maybe, if they're not, on an international roster or international squad. It's just such a massive world with so much to dive into. And there's always there's always a nut to be found if you're a squirrel. Like, you just constantly looking around, and there's always something interesting going on. So that's probably one of the things I like most about it, without getting too much into why, because I want to do like a whole kind of episode on why, soccer might not be as popular in the United States. But you said something, Dylan, that I got on Riverside and I recorded what I was going to be a TikTok that I was going to post. And it was basically the title. It was a clickbait title. It was like, America's so fat. And I made that title because the way soccer was always portrayed to me by my parents, and, I wasn't like an overweight kid or anything. I didn't need extra exercise, but it was always painted to me as go play soccer and run, get tired, go run. Like it was never, don't go be creative, don't go have fun with friends. Like, it was the sport that I went and I did to run, and no kid really likes doing that. So at least that's how it was painted to me by my parents and my friends, who also played baseball. There was a lot of overlap, but there was so much that went into it, like when I was young, that just made me not really want to play anymore. And the weird thing is, the seasons for soccer, it's a winter sport in Texas. Granted, Dylan and I's winters are very different. That basically means you're playing in 40 and 50 degrees here, where it would be, in the single digits there. But I didn't play any other winter sport, so it was wide open for me. I could have played it. I just chose not to. So what was your experience with when you stopped playing? What was kind of that? What was that cutoff? What was that line? Why did you stop?
Yeah, I mean,
it can be as simple as it just wasn't popular amongst your friends anymore.
Yeah, I mean, and I kind of think that's what it was. I mean, without getting too much into my own personal history, baseball kind of runs really deep in my family. My grandma was a season ticket holder with the Tigers, so I wanted to put everything I had into baseball, really. And baseball is somewhat of a year-round sport, obviously outside the winter in Michigan, and soccer is as well. So honestly, it was a time thing, and most of my friends, the good friends that I made young, were all baseball first kind of kids. So that was really a lot of it for me. And then I think it did have, like thinking about in middle school or maybe even elementary school, like the foot fairy mantra that kind of is used a lot in grade school in the US. Just kind of it's a soft sport, it's a lame sport. And there is a little bit of diving and theatrics in soccer, but I think it definitely gets a bad rap for that grade school age kids for the most part. I definitely didn't really appreciate the sport until high school. I just happened to have a couple of friends that played on the high school team, so I started really getting into soccer again. But at that point, if I haven't played since first grade, I mean, there was no really going back and starting to play again. But like you said, I think the reason a lot of younger kids play it is a sport to tire out kids, and that's what parents are looking to do. So if and my limited experience playing, it was, like you said, not a lot of creativity, not any real flair or fun to it. It was run up and down the field and try and run past people. And I think that kind of gets boring if you don't introduce the creative nuances that make the game amazing and make the game that we want to do a podcast about, So I think a lot of that does kind of get lost in those early ages. And I think that's why a lot of that interest kind of dies out in the US for kids.
Yeah. So you're in high school and you start following it pretty closely. You get to college and it kind of, dies off just because life happens. And how do you get from there to here? At what point did you pick it back up again? At what point did you kind of dive head first? If you're like me, you dove head first, and you dove head first into a pool without water. Like, it was straight and just consume as much as you possibly can, which I think is what you have to do if you're people like us living here in order to really embrace the sport. You can't go halfway because you'll never learn with soccer, there are over 100 like world-class players spread throughout the leagues that you need to know. And it gets overwhelming. Like, there could be, I might not know who the 38th best player in the world is just because he doesn't play in the Premier League or he's not on a team that I watch very much. So in order to really understand the world, you have to dive right into it. And when did you kind of, just tell me the whole story about kind of how you got back into it?
Yeah, so throughout, even when I wasn't watching it regularly throughout college, I think this is really relevant for a lot of people our age. When we were in college, playing FIFA was huge. Like, even for non-soccer fans, like, FIFA was just a great game to get together with a couple buddies, drink some beer.
Tyler Steele loved playing FIFA, man. That dude, my roommate for the reference.
It's like, it's just a simple enough video game, but can have those fun, exciting players that we were talking about. So I think I was always kind of still like, I enjoyed it, but like I said, life just came at me, and baseball was my everything. So I did kind of fall out of it, but then probably around 2019 or so, I started wanting to get back into it, and I was starting to watch some more games here and there. Then when the pandemic hit, everything got shut down, nowhere to go, nothing to do. Premier League came back, if I remember right, relatively early compared to a lot of sports. So it was like, well, I guess this is what I'm going to do on a Tuesday afternoon while I'm, working from home or at work and slow because of the pandemic. Like, so I guess I'm just going to start filling my free time with this. And then it became every single Saturday morning, every Sunday morning. And I decided I really, really wanted to be a fan of a team other than the traditional Big Six. So growing up, I don't know I think we've talked about it before. I can't remember if you've seen the movie or not, but Goal. It's about a kid from Mexico that immigrates to the U.S. and then gets found by a former Newcastle scout and goes on to play at Newcastle. It's a really hokey, cheesy, mid-2000s soccer movie, but I loved that movie growing up. I loved Newcastle's jersey, so I always tried to play with them in FIFA as a kid, and they were good back then. So when I started trying to get back into it, like, I wanted to find a new team to really, like you said, dive head first. In college, I was kind of a Man City fan because I was a Mario Balotelli fan, but I didn't want to go back to City because that just felt cheap.
Because their owners had a lot of money.
Not gratifying. Their owners had a lot of money. They were already good. Yeah. So for many reasons, I didn't want to go to Man City, which is kind of ironic, some of those now. And I really kind of wanted to be a Newcastle fan, but I had some friends on Twitter, like you did. I kind of put like a tweet out like, oh, who should I be a fan of? I'm kind of leaning towards Newcastle, and people are like, do not pick Newcastle. Their ownership is miserable. They may get sold to the Saudis. So at this point, Mike Ashley was still the owner. They may get sold to the Saudis. So that won't be good owners either for different reasons. They're like, just stay away, stay away. And I remember watching a game, and Newcastle was up 2-1 and got a red card in like the 75th or something like that. So plenty of time to give up a goal down a man. And I want to say they were playing Wolves. I can't remember for sure. So any Newcastle people, don't hate me if that didn't happen against Wolves in 2020. But I want to say it was Wolves. And I said to Abby, my fiance, I was like, if Newcastle holds on to this, because it was just a barrage of shots against them. I'm like, if they somehow hold on to this, like, this is it. Newcastle's my team. I'm going to do it. I'm going to go all in. And they ended up holding on and winning. And yeah, like I went out of my way to follow every Twitter account that I could that was Newcastle related, whether it just be an individual or a blog or a reporter or whatever it is, and set alarms. I'm lucky being on the Eastern time zone in the U.S. The early games aren't obnoxiously early, like they're very doable. I don't know how people on the West Coast are Premier League fans. It's
because the earliest, just for everybody listening, I think the earliest game you could have, like my time, is 6:30. It would be a 6:30 Central start, and that's like the early game in the Premier League. So if you're on the West Coast, that's a 4:30 start, and for you, it's a 7:30. But even the 6:30 is really early for. I mean, we played a game against Burnley at 6:30, and we ended up losing at Turf Moor. It was the game after we beat Man City, and it was just the most miserable morning of my life. I mean, horrible. But yeah, continue.
It is kind of nice. I think the 7:30 time slot's awesome for me because it's on the early side for sure. Like it is an alarm set,
especially for a weekend
if I want to watch, but it's not like obnoxiously early. Like I get up that early to go play golf. Like it's not like I hate doing it by any means. Yeah. It's not like it's a chore. In some ways I kind of like it because in the spring or in the fall, if it is that early, I still have time to, I have a whole day, like game's done it by 10 and I can do whatever I want the rest of the day. So in some ways it's kind of nice, but definitely spoiled being on the East Coast with those early kicks. But yeah, it's been an adventure for the last couple of years, just like you said, diving deep in. And that's why I'm so excited to do this, because I think there is a lot of value in a weird way of really trying to dive in and give it your all. Because like you said, it's really tough to be a soccer fan, be a half a soccer fan and not dive all the way in. So I think going through that process with some listeners, hopefully, I think will be a really cool opportunity.
Yeah, we got we posted that reactions to the stadiums, and we got some like really thought out, thorough comments. And from kind of what I gathered from those two commenters, it was just Americans who are like thirsty for soccer, like content and for discussion, and that's kind of similar to how we are, I think. And we'll do a whole, like I've told you, I think I've even said on the air in some of the previously recorded, and just so everybody knows, this is like the 5th or 6th episode we've recorded. We wanted to do some World Cup group preview so that we could kind of get some chemistry and some flow down. And so now we're going back and recording this true, official first episode. But now that we're here, it's like, let's just dive right in. And I'm excited to, like I've said, just learn more about it through talking through it. And we'll do, separate episodes on the teams that we support. And of course we'll do the cliche episode of, if you're an American, which Premier League team should you follow? Which right now it's looking like it's going to be Leeds because they're Team America.
I love those quizzes you can take.
Yeah.
When I was trying to decide, like, you just like Google, like, who should I support? And it asks you, like, do you like history? Right. Do you like winning? And it was kind of funny when I did like finally like settle on Newcastle like as my true team. Like I said, I always kind of enjoyed them, but as a super casual. So when I decided to like really dive into them, I wanted to learn as much as I could about them. And their fan base is absolutely rabid. They're in the far northeast of London, which is typically not a very like desirable location for players, and they haven't been good lately. And like there's so many parallels to being a Detroit sports fan. Well, really all of my sports teams, because Mizzou is the same way. Like we got solid fan bases and can't win a damn thing. And I feel like it's just going to make it that much sweeter when it does happen. And like, we'll jump into this in another time too, but the takeover, I think, will expedite
you would think
Newcastle success. And if I had to put money on it, I think they're going to be the first of my professional or college sports teams I support to have any real success. So I kind of feel like I'm cheating a little again, but it wasn't my fault they got bought, even if it was kind of known when I was picking that they might. But yeah, I think there's a lot of intrigue in the U.S. I have some friends. I think one of the things that's really interesting is the explosion of F1 due to the Netflix documentary. That was a sport that in the U.S. was non-existent. Like 5 years ago, I couldn't have told you one driver. And now all of my friends, and I'm somewhat into it. I'm not as into it as a lot of my friends, but all of my friends are absolute diehards. They'll wake up or stay up until 2 a.m. to watch a race in Japan or wherever the race is being held that week. And I think the thirst for, like you said, for something new for a lot of people is there, and something that people can dive into and kind of give it their full attention. I think one of the things that the Premier League in the US should and could capitalize on is that kind of down period for people after football ends. I think it's going to be really tough to convince any of my friends on a Sunday morning to that 11:30 or 12:30 Sunday Man City versus Liverpool in November. Like, I'm not, or a Saturday morning instead of college game.
I was just about to say that.
I'm not even expecting to do that for people. So I think one thing the Premier League could capitalize, and I think one of the reasons F1 is successful is because it kind of hits that sweet spot. It's right when football kind of ends. Unfortunately for soccer this year, it's not going to be available to us in the summer, really, like it would normally be this year for the World Cup. I think that's super unfortunate, especially going into 2026, having it in North America. I think that would have been a really good time to capitalize and draw some fans into soccer in the U.S. So I do think that is kind of unfortunate. But yeah, there's definitely a thirst out there for people that want something to be able to dive into, especially in that February to May time frame. And that's when the Premier League is arguably the most exciting, because there's so many chases going on. So I think there's definitely interest in the US. I think just got to find a way to reel people in, and I'm hoping this podcast will do this. I'm going to force some of my friends to listen to this, whether they're soccer fans or not, and hopefully it kind of hooks them. That's
I think one thing that I want to do, but that I know will be difficult to do, is to put into words what the sport is. And I'll explain that by saying the sport isn't, if you look at it like just a sport, they play on the field with a ball and some grass and your feet, it's not as entertaining as it can be. And that's all a lot of people in America see. What really, I think, clicked for me once I realized how to watch the game, and it's like just as much watching the people without the ball as it is watching the ball. The thing that really clicked with me is it's a combination. It's the merging of my two probably favorite things in this world, and that's sports and travel. The cultures of soccer, or the culture of soccer, and how it blends Portugal and Germany and England and Brazil and Argentina. It's really cool. It's fascinating for me, being kind of a wanderlust personality. My fiance and I, we went to the FC Dallas game last night, and we sat next to two Brazilians, and one of FC Dallas's midfielders, Alan Velasco, who's Argentinian, he scored a free kick, just an absolute banger. I mean, it was beautiful. And they were like, oh man, I got to give credit to the Argentinian there, because there's a huge Brazil-Argentina rivalry. And Tottenham, the team I support, just signed a player named Richarlison, who's a very outspoken, vibrant, if you will, Brazilian. Yeah. And we have Christian Romero, who's a very aggressive brute on defense, and they don't get along very well historically. Partly because of that national rivalry, partly because of just the way they play and the positions they play. But it'll be interesting to see how they are as teammates. It might become one of those stepbrother situations where it's like we hate each other. Did we just become best friends, sort of thing? So it's interesting. And, me being in the States, it sucks because I would love to go watch a Champions League game in Lisbon, Portugal, just take a train and be there. But of course we can't. So it takes a lot more planning to get to those high level games. I went to the MLS game last night, and I'm by no means somebody that's going to like down talk the MLS, and I'm not going to be like a European snob where it's just those leagues are so much better, but they are. I mean, you can just tell the difference in the level of the sport, and that's fine. I mean, that's the reason, it's the number one sport over there, and it isn't here. But the MLS it's becoming more lucrative. They're able to pay players a lot more. So I think the quality is on the up and up, and it is becoming kind of that European retirement league, which will be interesting to see in the long run how that works out. I think Messi's already said he's finishing his career with Inter Miami. He's a part owner, and he's going to come over here and play for at least a year. And obviously you've got Gareth Bale, who, a lot of people remember his last few years at Real Madrid, but he dominated in the 2010s. I mean, that dude was an absolute stud. And one of the best players in the world through that stretch, won 4 Champions Leagues. And he's coming to play in LA. And then you got Chiellini, who's one of the best Italian defenders of all time, coming over. It's going to be interesting to see how the MLS evolves, both popularity wise and on the field. But I think the kind of bringing it all back to what I was talking about earlier, it's the blend of the cultures and the the languages and the food, and there's a specific picture that will probably always be ingrained in my mind. It's a picture of 5 Tottenham players and their coach, who's Italian, hugging after a goal, and they all speak different first languages. And it's like, how do you play a sport and you don't speak the same language? It's mind-boggling to me as an American, because I had trouble communicating with my teammates on the field in baseball, in a sport that we all played forever and spoke the same languages. It's like, how do you speak 5 different languages and you're able to communicate in a sport that relies so heavily on communication?
One thing you started to get into it a little, I'm really interested in the next couple of years is I don't know if it's going to happen, but the potential for even more cash injection into the MLS. First thing that kind of comes to mind is Live Golf, the Saudi-backed golf league, and it's a pretty hot button topic, but because of the human rights issues with Saudi Arabia is where most of that issue with it comes from. But I'd be kind of interested to see if going into the World Cup or shortly after the World Cup, we in North America, we see something like that in the MLS, where people see it as an opportunity to, it's starting to grow here. If I'm Inter Miami and I go sign Messi, that's a huge draw. And do I also go sign some other Argentinian who's not at the back end of their career and bring them over with Messi and really try and blow it up here? Because I think if we saw more of the talent here, I do think it would be a quicker rise in popularity. You and I have talked, I'm not sure if on air or off air, but you and I have kind of talked about how we both kind of think it's somewhat likely that soccer will pass baseball in the not too distant future in the U.S. So I mean, we see the contracts that baseball is able to hand out. I think a lot of it is obviously TV deals, and that's why they have the ability to do that. But the MLS new deal with Apple TV is fairly lucrative, with the understanding that soccer, I think Apple TV is kind of ahead of the curve. The understanding soccer is on the come up. So
Apple TV saw their success with Ted Lasso and was like, we're going to go ahead and take MLS.
Yeah, we're gonna be the soccer. We're gonna compete with Paramount and try and and Peacock and try and be the home for soccer for the U.S. But I think it'll be really interesting to see if something Live-esque happens. I don't think it will be throwing stupid money at players like Live is doing, but it could be throwing, maybe a guy who would normally be on 300,000 week wages. You offer $450 or something, which is a considerable pay bump, but not like outlandish like some of the stuff we're seeing in Live, and try and attract some of that talent over here with the understanding.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That would be,
I think
that would be interesting.
Really interesting.
Yeah, didn't think about that. To kind of wrap up this intro, I want to kind of talk about the so when my family or my friends or my fiance, they're like, oh, you started a soccer podcast, like why, like why do you like it so much? Why do you think, is this just a fad? Because like with F1 last year, we got really into it, and I still will check every race and see who won, see who was on the podium, but it was very much like a flash in the pan sort of thing. And I've kind of already touched on it, but for me, it's just, there's always something to consume. It's never ending. There's always something new, always something happening. So what's kind of been your pitch to people around you thus far on why, and we kind of talked about it, but I want to just come out and like say, okay, what are our pitches to our audience and to the people around us? Why should they listen to us and consider really diving into the sport?
As far as diving into the sport, I think we've both kind of done a good job of explaining, like it is a full-on year-round, throw yourself at it source of entertainment. The NFL has a significant down period. Like I couldn't tell you the last time I cared about anything in it. Well, yeah, since February, probably since the Super Bowl, and I probably won't check in on the NFL until my fantasy football drafts in a month. So that's a huge downtime, and you don't see that in soccer. Like we joke about it with each other. Like I have Fabrizio Romano's Twitter notifications on, and I read every single one of his tweets all summer. And like it's fun. Like there's so much happening. It's constant. It's ever changing. I think one of the reasons I have enjoyed it as well is the community aspect.
Wow, that's something we haven't even touched on. Yeah, that's a big one.
I can only speak to kind of the Newcastle side of it, but it's just so fun engulfing yourself in a culture that you weren't familiar with before. Like I love the Newcastle fans and pages that I follow from Newcastle that live in Newcastle, and even the silly things, just like how they talk, and like it's just all so different and so fascinating. And like you said, I also really enjoy traveling and different cultures, and I think that part of it's just kind of fun for me. And there's so many layers to it. You peel back a new layer. It feels like every month, and there's just another thing that I love. The transfer window is amazing, and like you said, it's probably only like, I don't think you said this exactly, but for me, it's probably only like 50 to 70% of the sport itself. And there's so much of it is everything else that goes into it. The culture, the transfers, the drama at times is kind of fun. There's just so many different things about soccer that we don't have in North American sports. I think the promotion and the relegation is incredibly fascinating. There's just so many different things about soccer that is so unlike anything else there is to consume. So if you are a sports fan in general, and that's, I mean, after my fiance's family listened to our stadium or our venue reaction podcast, and they're like, man, I knew you were into sports, but you know, like a lot about bunch of different sports. And that's kind of how I always felt like I was. Like I just always like engulfing myself in sports, and soccer is by far the most encompassing sport to really throw yourself at. So if you're at all like somebody who just likes consuming sports, soccer is by far the best sport to fully throw yourself.
Yeah, and I just have one thing to add to that. It's like you really realize how deprived we are in some aspects of our American sports when you see how well soccer does it. Promotion relegation is something we'll never have here, but it makes the sport what it is in some ways, because there has to be passion drawn from the top of the table to the bottom of the table, if you will, which like there's no tanking involved. There's no tanking, really. What it is, there's pride to be had, whether you're at the top or the bottom, staying up, going down. it's every fan of every team has something to cheer for, whether it's the battle for European place or to stay up or to win the league. It doesn't matter. And then the transfer market in general, you know, the NFL has just a trash free agency period. And, you know, I couldn't tell you the last, like, I'm sure there was, but like a big trade that happened in the NFL. They're very few and far between. And you know, like a player like Messi, if you put him in an American sport on an American team, he's probably going to be with that team his whole career, at least through his prime. But with Messi, you know, he's still a great player, and he goes from the best or one of the best teams in one league to the best team in another league. It's just blockbuster after blockbuster after blockbuster, and it never ends. So yeah, go ahead.
It's kind of it's kind of cool too, because that all happens, but there is such a passion behind it. Like in the States right now, there's questions in college athletics about, you know, transfers and NIL, and is it going to take away the pageantry? And like you still have that, like the idea of a team full of somewhat mercenaries is almost what PSG kind of is. But like there is still some pageantry around a newer club like PSG that does have a lot of mercenaries. There is still a culture at each club, and I think that's something that's kind of unique too, because I think if college football specifically goes where a lot of people think it's going to go, we're going to lose a lot of what makes college football great, and a lot of the things that are going to cause college football to lose what makes it great already happen in soccer. But soccer is still able to have that like rabid fan base. Everybody is so dedicated and loyal, and it's just such a unique culture around the game. And I feel like I've said that 6 or 7 times now, and I feel like
it's important
and redundant, but it is such a unique culture that if you haven't experienced it and you just enjoy sports in general, it's something you definitely need to take a look at.
Yeah, and just know to everybody, it's very easy to get involved in, like, people are, you know, it's easy to get involved in those cultures. It's easy to find communities on, you know, on social media and things like that and really get involved. So, you know, don't think just because you're over here, you can't feel like you're over there when, you know, when the games are going on and or when something big happens for your club. You can be connected very easily.
If you're going to be a supporter of a somewhat larger club, and you pick a team, I would highly recommend just literally Googling like Tottenham, Dallas, Fort Worth area. And there's going to be a fan group that probably gets together at some local bar to watch games on a regular basis. Unfortunately, I don't have that in Detroit with Newcastle. Newcastle is not as big of a brand, but there are multiple cities across the U.S. that have that. Like there's a group in San Diego that I've become social media type friends with people that are all they call themselves like the San Diego Mags, and there's a group in Denver and a group in the DMV area. Like there are groups around where, like you said, while you're across the pond, you can still engulf yourself in the community and get that like face-to-face interaction if that's something that you enjoy about sports, like going to games. Obviously you can't go to games, but if you're at a bar with 10 buddies all supporting the same club, like that has potential to be just as good as any other viewing experience in the US. So I do think that is a hesitation sometimes, but I highly encourage people to look into that type of stuff if it's something you're interested in.
Definitely. So this podcast moving forward, we're going to upload this one, and this will be our intro. And then Dylan and I are going to record a World Cup kind of preview episode later in the week. And then we're going to start getting World Cup preview episodes out. So we've done groups A through D. We're going to finish up. And then it'll just kind of be a weekly, maybe bi-weekly thing, depending on what happens. There'll be some episodes where I record by myself, some where Dylan records by himself, several where there's both of us, and several where there's a guest. So the production value will start low. I'm literally just going to take this MP4 file, throw it on YouTube, take the MP3 file, throw it on Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. But we're going to try to, up the ante a little bit moving forward, especially moving into the new season. I want to try to get Twitch working. I want to figure out how to do that so we can do like green screen stuff and like show picture. I'm sure there's a way to like show players of pictures as we're or pictures of players while we're talking about them on here. But that's kind of what I want to do moving forward. But right now I'm just going to upload these files, and if you guys listen, give us a comment, like, follow, subscribe, all that. That's all I have. Anything you have, Dylan?
No, I'm excited to go on this journey, not only with you, but hopefully a whole bunch of listeners.
We appreciate it, guys. Y'all be safe out there, and we will talk to you next time.